सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयो ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि. Having made pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat the same, you engage in battle for the sake of battle. Thus, you shall win and not incur sin. The Gita is a textbook to be studied in itself, since Vyasa's attempt in the Gita is to present to the Hindus of his generation a restatement of the entire Vedic theory and practice. As such, man, the very many popular terms and terminologies of the Vedic flavor have been taken up to express a shade of meaning peculiar to the Gita. Always we find in them a better sense of practical application and utility. One who is only a hasty student of the Upanishads may not fully come to realize all the implications of these words and as used in the Gita. No doubt the Gita talks the familiar language of the Vedas, but implies a new meaning and indicates more practical ways of living the Vedas in a period when social living, communal tensions, lust for power, and clash of cultural ideologies have come to stay. In any textbook of science, there is a chapter discussing categories, which explains and defines the technical terms used in that science. The Gita has its own lexicon, and Vyasa leaves its discovery to the diligent students, industry, and self application. We will find later on that Karma Yoga of the Vedas, wherein it meant only the self purification gained through ritualistic sacrifice and mental concentration practices, has been re-employed here by Krishna to include and incorporate the activities of the world at all levels in everyday's day-to-day existence. The very word yoga, which perhaps frightened away the ordinary man by the time of the Puranic age, is used here so liberally that we have got in the Gita something like 8 or 10 different types of yogas advised: Bhakti Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, Anasakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga. And even yoga has been described as dexterity in action. This is as it should be, because at certain periods of history, a generation comes to entertain a sentimental dread, along with an intellectual aversion, for the best in their own culture, and at all such moments a revival can take place only when the ideal fear has been removed from the mind of the populace. The easiest method of its removal is by bringing down the awe-inspiring words to cheaper usages without spoiling the glow fire of its prestige usage. A child who is frightened of the domesticated cat soon grows to be a young cat tyrant in the house when it slowly gets familiarized with the animal. Similarly, in the case of the Vedic technique of self-perception, perfection, which has become empty and hollow and even frightening to the Hindus of that period, Vyasa familiarized them with the tamer implication of the terms to the Bhagavad Gita. From this stanza onwards, we have a slight hint upon the technique of Karma Yoga as explained in the Gita. In the introduction, we have already stated that the second chapter is almost a summary of the whole Gita. Later on, we shall see how the paths of devotion also is in brief indicated in the very chapter. In this stanza, we have Krishna's first direct statement on the technique of self-perfection, and as such, a very careful study of it must be extremely fruitful to all students of the Gita. The three pairs of opposite mentioned here fall distinctly as experiences at the three levels of our mortal existence. Pain and pleasure are at the intellectual awareness of experiences unfavorable and favorable. Gain and loss conceptions indicate the mental zone where we feel the joys of arrival and the sorrows of parting. Conquest and defeat indicate the physical fields wherein, at the level of the body, we win ourselves or let others win over us. The advice that Krishna gives is that one must learn to keep oneself in equilibrium in all these different vicissitudes at the different levels of one's own existence. If one were to enter the sea for a bath, one must know the art of self bathing, or else incessantly waves will play rough on the person and may even take him out his feet and drag him into the bosom of the watery grave. But the one who knows the art of either saving himself by ducking beneath the mighty waves or riding over the lesser ones, he can enjoy a sea bath. To expect all the waves to end, or to hope that the waves would not trouble one while he is in the seas, is to order the sea to be something other than itself for one's convenience. This is exactly the folly man does in life. He expects his life to be without waves, and life is full of waves: pain and pleasure, gain and loss, conquest and defeat. Must buffet waters of life, or else it is complete stagnation, it is death. If life be thus a tossed storm, sea at all times, and it should be so, then then we who have come to live life must know the art of living in it, unaffected by either the rising crest or the sinking troughs in it. To identify ourselves with any kind of them is to float on the surface and not to stand aside like a lighthouse on the bedrock of the very sea. Here Krishna advises Arjuna, while inviting him to fight, that he should enter the contest and keep himself unaffected by the usual dissipating mental tendency that come to everyone while in activity. This equanimity of the mind alone can bring the beam of inspiration and give you your achievement the glow of real success. It is very well known that in all activities inspired work gathers to itself a texture of divine perfection which cannot be imitated or oft repeated. Be he a poet or an artist, a doctor or a speaker, irrespective of his profession, whenever an individual is at his best, his masterpiece is always accepted by all as a work of inspiration. When we thus work with the thrilled ecstasy of an unknown mood called inspiration, the idea, thought, and activity that come out of us have a ringing beauty of their own which cannot be mechanically repeated by the very creator. Thus Da Vinci could not repeat for a second time and copy on a different piece of canvas the enigmatic smile of his Mona Lisa. Keats' pen would no more recapture for a second time the song of the nightingale in its flight. Beethoven could never again beat out of his faithful piano a second moonlight sonata. The Lord himself, when again after the war was requested by Arjuna to repeat the Gita, admittedly his inability to do so. To the Western mind and understanding, inspiration is an accidental and mysterious happening over which the mortal has no control at all, while to the Eastern rishis, an inspired living is a real godly destiny of man when he lives in perfect unison with the self in him, a balanced life wherein we live as an unaffected witness of even our own mind and intellect in the realm of self forgetfulness, where instead of becoming inefficient, our profession gathers scintillating glow of a new dawn. This extra aura in any achievement is that which rises an ordinary success to an inspired achievement. The yogis of the ancient Hindu lore discovered a technique whereby the mind and the intellect can be thus unconsciously brought to the steadiness and poise, and this technique is called yoga. The Hindus of the Vedic period knew it, practiced it, and lived to provide their country with their incomparable achievements, the golden era of the Hindus. The same idea is now reinterpreted here by Vyasa through Krishna's song Divine, sung to his generation, addressing a representative man at the time, the chivalrous Arjuna, the honored prince of the archers. The philosophy of a country like India in the Vedic period must necessarily be theistic, but it has its application in all walks of life. If it fails in all round application, it cannot be a philosophy. A theory of life which has no universal application can only be appreciated as a noble opinion of an individual which may have its own limited application, but it can never be accepted as a philosophy. In the entire scheme of Bhagwan's argument so far, he has provided Arjuna with all the necessary arguments which a healthy intellect should discover for itself before it can come to be a reliable and dependable judgment upon the outer happenings. Mere spiritual consideration is not the last word in the evaluating the material situations. Every challenge is to be estimated from the spiritual standpoint, from the intellectual standpoint, or reason, from the emotional level of ethics and morality, and from the physical level of tradition and custom. If all these considerations, without any contradictions in themselves, indicate a solitary truth, it is surely then the divine path of judgment that one should at all costs take up. Arjuna came to this delusory miscalculation of the situation because he evaluated the war only from the level of his sentiments. The opposing forces were beaming with his own relation, and to kill and to exterminate one's own cousins and uncles were indeed against the ethical point of view. But this emotionalism overpowered him, and he could not discover any other data to check himself with. At this moment of his total inward chaos, he surrendered to Krishna as a mind should have inner discriminative capacity. Therefore, the Lord, having accepted to guide Arjuna, provides him with all the available data gathered from different points of view. Throughout the Gita, Krishna plays the part of discriminative intellect in the individual, a true charioteer in the Upanishadic sense of the term. After placing thus for Arjuna's consideration all the possible points of view upon the problem, the spiritual, the intellectual, the ethical, and the traditional, Krishna concludes in the earlier stanza that Arjuna must fight. In the stanza under the review, Krishna is trying to explain how he should fight the war with perfect detachment from all anxieties which generally come to an individual when he identifies himself with a non self. At the level of his intellect, with the concept of pain and pleasure, at the level of his mind, with the fears of gain and loss, and at the level of the body, with restlessness of conquest and defeat. Equanimity in all such mental challenges is a factor that ensures true success in life. Earlier, we had already explained how human mind is to be kept open while at work in its given field of life, so that while living in the midst of life's battle, it will get an exhaustion of the vasanas that are already there in it. This purgation, catharsis of the soul, is compelling purpose for which every living creature has arrived on the platform of manifested life. Viewed thus, each individual living creature, plant, animal, or man, is but a bundle of vasanas. Equanimity in the face of all situation advised here. Is a secret method of keeping the mind ever open for this outflow. When it gets clouded by the ego senses and egoistic desires, then the outflow is choked and new tendencies start flooding in. The ego is declared when an individual starts getting upset at all these pairs of opposite dvandas, such as joys and sorrows. The attempt to keep equanimous is to act detached from the ego. Thus, mental purification, vasanas, catharsis, the beginning result of real living and right action. And this is yoga. This is explained later on in Gita in all detail as Karma Yoga. This philosophical theory of truth has been described already in the very opening of the Lord's message, and in the order to drive home those conclusions in the practical mind of Arjuna, Lord Krishna gave the standpoint of the common man. Ultimately, he concluded that Arjuna must fight, and he explained in what attitude he should fight. The practical side of religion is in the living, the philosophy one has understood. सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धं युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापम वाप्स्यसि.